is Babajide Ogusowo, data and information consultant. He's with me here in the studio. Babajide, great to see you.
Good evening,
as always.
Amachi.
Right. So the discussion, based on the facts that you have and everything else that we know, what are the consequences then of maintaining or changing how VAT is collected and distributed in the country?
So we could have that discussion by looking at it from how the elites will understand it and looking at how the common man will understand it. So let's start with how the elites will look at it. From their perspective, there's good news and bad news when we talk about VAT. The good news is that we've seen, in terms of quantity, VAT increase since 2015. So in 2020, last year, total value-added tax that was collected, 1.5 trillion naira. That was more than double what was collected in 2015. So from that perspective, good news. The bad news comes when we look at quality. And by quality, one way to measure that is to look at the per capita value-added tax collected, which is amount of money we've collected per citizen per day. And from that perspective, the average is 20 naira per citizen per day. So from the quantity perspective, good news. From the quality of VAT, bad news. But more importantly, the common man. And the common man needs to really understand the genesis of the problem. And one way to do that is to have a small practical. And let's quickly look at it this way. To understand what and how this VAT is shared, money is collected from citizens like you and I, and based on the Constitution, if, for instance, we have 2,000 naira in the value-added tax pool, which is 2,000 naira as the monies that has been collected from all Nigerians from VAT, the Constitution states that all the states should take 1,000 naira. The federal government and the local governments will keep 1,000 naira. But because this discussion has started and with the states, we'd like to talk about how the states will share their 1,000 naira notes. The law states three things. The first is, if the states have 1,000 naira to share, 500 naira should be shared equally among all states. That leaves us with a balance of 500 naira. It then states that 60% of that balance, which is 300 naira, should be shared based on population. So first of all, we've shared 500 naira equally among all states. We have a balance of 500 naira. Out of the balance of 500 naira, I repeat, 300 naira, which is 60% of 500, will be shared based on population. So for instance, Kano State, based on the last census, had a population of 7%. They will collect 7% of 300 naira, and the balance 200 naira will be shared based on how much each state contributed to the VAT pool.
So
and that is the challenge.
It seems quite unfair. So it's good now that we actually take a look at some of the sectors that actually generate the most VAT in the country. That might help.
That might help. So now we're done with this. And if we take a look carefully at which sectors accounted for the non-import VAT, which is the VAT that is really generated at the states, here's what you will find. The first is professional services account for the largest contribution of VAT. Then we have other manufacturing, and by other manufacturing, that is small-scale manufacturing of some jewelry, sport goods, and some items. And then we also have commerce and trading, which is the buying and selling that really goes between traders. And it's also interesting that we see that breweries, alcohol, also contributes a large portion to VAT that is collected at the states.
How significant is that?
It's quite significant, especially when we look at the discussions that we've heard from some leaders that have said that some states do not allow sales of alcohol, yet they will share from VAT from alcohol proceedings. Even though that is true, let's take a look at which states really consume most of the alcohol in Nigeria. And the fact shows that 10 states in Nigeria account for 70%, based on the facts from the NBS, 10 states account for 70% of all alcohol that is consumed in Nigeria. And if you take a look at those 10 states that account for which accounts for 70% of all alcohol that is consumed, what you'll notice is, yes, Lagos State is number 1, Akwa Ibom number 2, Anambra, Edo in that order, Cross River. We see River State on 9th on the list. The summary is 9 out of these 10 states are located in the southern region of Nigeria. In other words, the south consumes significantly most of the alcohol, and that the fact is, yes, in northern Nigeria, they still share some of the tax from
So
alcohol
you
sales.
understand the agitation why the South really is complaining about, having to share, more money, despite the fact that some of the goods are not allowed in some parts of the country.
But yes, while that is the fact, we cannot have this discussion by only looking at the fairness and the equality of VAT. We also need to look at the equity. Moreover, the VAT it goes into a pool, so there isn't an alcohol pool, there isn't a professional pool, it's a general pool, and so the states that are receiving money from alcohol VAT do not have a choice. It's because all the VAT.
So eventually, religious, and personal preferences shouldn't affect VAT. Eventually.
It shouldn't. But here's what you notice: the VAT discussion really is about money sharing. What the discussion and what our focus in the country should really be about is how do we produce more money? Yes, the states might get more VAT, but it's just a matter of how do you want to slice the cake. What the states need to really fight for is how do we get citizens to be more productive so that in the economy there is more money available for families to take care of themselves and yes, for citizens to pay tax. As long as we keep having these discussions on consumption, how do we want to share rather than how do we want to produce? Yes, we'll keep having these challenges, and that is what has really been missing. And finally, in the words of Winston Churchill, any nation that thinks it can tax itself to prosperity is similar to a man that stands in a bucket and feels he can lift himself up through the handles. We cannot tax ourselves into prosperity. We can only produce ourselves into prosperity.
Word for the wise, Babajide. Thanks again for reminding us what is really important.
Do you want to keep this?
Well, yes.
You can have it. It's always great to be here.
Great to have you. Thanks for joining us.